2025 is almost in the rearview mirror, and with it, another year of major cycling innovations, heartbreaking industry losses, and of course, a boatload of incorrect predictions we made back in January. Really, if 2025 taught us anything, it's that trying to predict the cycling industry is just about as easy as reading tea leaves from a bottom bracket shell. So in this video, we're going back and looking at every one of our predictions that we made and seeing where we were right, where we were wrong, and most importantly, getting a grasp as to where the industry stands as the year comes to an end. But before we get started, let me know in the comments what you think the biggest cycling related story was from 2025. A year ago, we at 99 Spokes were pretty confident that the cycling industry had finally weathered the post-COVID storm and was ready to settle into a period of calm. And that's not what happened at all. Instead of stabilization, 2025 proved to be just as turbulent, if not even more so, than the previous year. Here's just a brief recap of what we saw. Rocky Mountain entered financial restructuring. Revel halted operations, only to be revived by its founder, Adam Miller, a few months later. In a similar move, YT closed down shop rather dramatically before being bought back by its founder, Marcus Flossman. And it hasn't just been the mountain bike industry either. The latest victim appears to be Rad Power Bikes, who publicly warned that they are deep in the red and facing a potential shutdown. What made this all so surprising is that there really were a lot of signs that pointed towards stabilization. Pandemic-era overstock was almost gone, and the deep, unsustainable discounts seemed to be drying up. But as 2025 unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't going to be enough to fully recuperate what some of these brands had lost over the past few years. But if there's a silver lining, and I know it's a bit of a stretch calling it a silver lining, it's that second chances are there for those who take them. We saw this play out relatively successfully in 2024 when Kona was bought back by its founders, and we're hoping for similar stories to come from YT and Revel. Speaking of happy endings though, how about the return of Nuke Proof, who's officially managed to claw its way back into the spotlight after disappearing under the Wiggle chain reaction collapse back in 2023. So while we were wrong about 2025 being the year that everything would stabilize again, there is still definitely a glimmer of hope. Brands are still fighting, a few beloved names are making comebacks, and I'd even go as far as to say that the worst is behind us. But that's exactly what I did last year, and we all know how that turned out. Somebody find me some wood to knock on. Next up, let's talk prices, specifically tariff-induced price change. And this time around, I'm thankful to say, or really not thankful to say, that we were right. The newly introduced trade tariffs did force many bike manufacturers to increase prices. Specialized informed retailers that new orders as of May 1st, 2025 would include a 10% tariff surcharge listed as a separate line item. Meanwhile, Trek told its dealer network that, quote, bike prices for most models will rise immediately because of the 10% tariff increase, and that these changes would apply even to back orders. And it wasn't just the big dogs either. State Bicycle Co., Kona, and youth bike manufacturer Early Rider all increased prices or added a surcharge. But some brands took a different approach by either finding ways to absorb the price increase themselves or restructuring their manufacturing. Take Aventon, who shifted 100% of its production outside of China, which they claim increased manufacturing and logistics costs by 10 to 15%. But for the time being, it's being absorbed by the company. Now, of course, tariffs and trade relations have continued to fluctuate throughout the year, and there's no telling if or for how long these will be around, but for now, it seems that there has been a net negative effect on the bike industry. Thankfully though, those cycling industry woes didn't hit everybody equally hard. And some companies, like this video's sponsor, Ari, have been blowing up over the past year. Ari opened its first satellite location in Bentonville, Arkansas, had 4 athletes invited to compete on the US Cycling World Champs team, and even had their own rider, Kaylee Skelton, take the USA Downhill Nationals and Monster Energy Pro Downhill Series overall titles. Ari offers a bunch of different financing options and a 30-day love it or return it guarantee. Collectively, that makes Ari a fantastic option if you're on the market for a new bike right now. And I've left a link where you can check out their entire selection of gravel, road, and mountain bikes in the description. But enough business chat, let's move on to the bikes themselves. Back in January, we predicted that we would see more brands using the same frame across a relatively wide range of cycling categories or disciplines. Case in point, the new Trek Fuel family. The bike is sold as, and can be switched between, a variety of wheel sizes and travel variants, just by swapping out the rocker link and lower shock mount. Another great example is the Orbea Rayon, which uses their clever gravity link to once again switch between various wheel sizes and travel numbers. And it's not just mountain bikes that are trending in this direction. We've already seen quite a few manufacturers drop their dedicated aero or climbing bike for one more all-around race bike. And earlier this year, Parley released the Ure, which aims to blend race-ready weight and aerodynamics with the all-day pedalability of an endurance bike. We can see an extreme and almost kind of futuristic take on this versatility by looking at the Also TMB, which features a fully interchangeable top frame that can be swapped between different rider sizes and even reconfigured to change the bike's purpose entirely. While we're on the subject of frame design, let's talk about geometry. Last year, we predicted that more and more brands would be taking a closer look at size-specific geometry. Or in other words, changing not just the top tube and seat tube length, but fine-tuning the entire package to better suit the height and weight of a typical rider in a given size range. We also speculated that this might result in a decrease in the total number of sizes a given frame is made in. Think of it as a switch to quality rather than quantity. And I'd say that we were halfway correct here. It is true that companies are listening and fine-tuning everything from tubing length to suspension leverage rates and even carbon layups from size to size. But it doesn't appear that the total number of size options are dropping off quite like we thought. Take the new Ibis Ripley and Ripmo AF that came out earlier this summer. Just about everything from the chainstay length to effective seat tube angle and even bottom bracket height changes between frame sizes. But both bikes are still available in 5 sizes with a claimed fit from 5'0" to 6'7". Another reduction we predicted we'd see in 2025 is the amount of general cycling categories. And I'd say in this case, we were right, at least philosophically. The amount of terrain a given bike can handle has grown massively over the past 5 years or so. A middle-of-the-road, modern trail bike can now survive a day at the bike park, line up on an XC race, and still feel playful on everyday single track. The same is true on the road side of things. Today's all-road bikes are lighter and more aerodynamic than ever, but they're still more comfortable and capable on rougher terrain. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap between different categories of bikes across all disciplines of cycling. But here's the problem. If one bike can do everything relatively well, then you don't need all these bikes like I have behind me. And of course, bike manufacturers are in the business of keeping your garage full and their bank account full, so they're gonna find ways to sell you more bikes. These days, it seems like the cycling industry is on a never-ending quest to invent new categories. The big thing for 2025 has been full suspension gravel and drop bar mountain bikes. Models like the Trek Check Out, the Lee Coogan Innova Super Gravel, and the soon-to-arrive Salsa Wanderosa all blur the line between gravel, XC, and light trail. But I'm going to be the bad guy here and say that a good old-fashioned hardtail already does blur the line between gravel, XC, and light trail. So, do you really need that new 100mm drop bar gravel bike? Maybe not. But that's not going to stop anyone from trying to sell it to you. Speaking of bike categories blending into each other, let's talk about EMTBs, and specifically the difference between full power and SL bikes. We predicted that eventually batteries and motors would grow sophisticated enough that these two categories would essentially blend together. And in some ways, we're already seeing that. Take, for example, the Forbidden Druid E Lite that they launched at Seattle Classic. It uses DJI's Avinox drive unit, which puts out a staggering 850 watts of power and 105 newton meters of torque, placing it squarely in the full power camp. But pair that with a 600 watt-hour battery, and you get a bike as light as 45.9 pounds or 20.8 kilograms. Now compare that to the Polygon Colossus TLE, which features a Bosch Performance Line SX drive unit delivering 250 watts of power, 55 newton meters of torque, and a 400 watt-hour battery, but still weighs 49 pounds or 22.2 kilograms. That's 3 pounds or 1.4 kilograms heavier than the Forbidden. Now, to be fair, both of these bikes are outliers, and there's a pretty big difference in price between them as well. But I think they serve as an illustration that it's no longer the case that if you want a lightweight EMTB, then you have to sacrifice power. But that brings us to the question of what that means for SL bikes in the future. Are they completely done for, or are we going to see the SL category continue to grow lighter over time as well, and say end up with a 30 to 35 pound pedal assist bike? Well, we're kind of starting to move in that direction. TQ recently released the HPR 40 drive system, which, when combined with their 290 watt-hour battery, has a system weight of just 6.4 pounds or 2.9 kilograms. We've yet to see this spec on a mountain bike, but it's made for some impressively sleek and light e-road and gravel bikes. Now, one prediction we definitely got right is that Shimano was going to finally release their first wireless drivetrain. And they did, the Shimano XTR Di2. But one thing we didn't expect to see quite so quick was the trickle down of that technology to XT and even Dior. The new drivetrains introduced a lot of cool features, but in some ways they were a bit lackluster compared to what people expected. Now, one thing I was really stoked on was the release of the new 9 to 45 tooth short cage configuration, delivering the same gear range as their standard 10 to 51 tooth cassette, but with less weight and improved ground clearance. Another highlight was the price. They come in a good bit less than their SRAM counterparts, specifically when we're talking about Dior, which lists for just $945, making it the cheapest way you can remove your derailleur cable, other than switching to single speed, that is. Let's stick with components for just a bit longer and talk about tire size, which we predicted would go up across just about every discipline of cycling. On the road side, this was absolutely the case. Pogacar was running some massive rubber at the Tour, measuring in at a whopping 33 millimeters, and most modern endurance bikes are seeing 40 plus mil clearance front and rear. And it's the same story with gravel, with bikes like the Ari Schaefer boasting room for 58C or 29 by 2.25 inch tires. But it seems as though mountain bikes have sort of settled into their sweet spot. The 2.6 inch tires that were growing in popularity as an OEM spec now look to have been just a blip in the radar. And it seems as though 2.4s, with maybe a 2.5 up front, are set to remain the standard on everything from XC to downhill rigs. Even elite cross-country racers, who are notoriously slow to adopt anything that adds a few grams, have landed in this zone as well. Our second to last prediction is that we would continue to see the adoption of long travel dropper posts, and with it, more bikes that allow for the maximum amount of seat post insertion while also keeping overall seat post height low. And this certainly proved to be the case. Bikes like the new Trek Fuel, Kona Heihei, and Norco Revolver have all made massive improvements in dropper post fitment when compared to the previous generation model. Naturally, accompanying this is longer travel dropper posts. These days, most brands have at least a 220 or 240 mil post, and RockShox took the coveted top spot with 250 mils of drop on their new Reverb axis. But one thing we haven't really seen yet is an increase in the amount of travel adjustment that you can make on a given post. Insertion depth on a lot of new frames is good enough that mediums and up could easily fit a 200 or even 220 mil post. So picture this, if there was a dropper post that had more or less infinite level of travel adjustment, then you could run that same, say 200 mil post on just about every frame size, and then allow the rider to fine tune that to fit their specific needs. This means less SKUs for manufacturers to manage, and on our end, less wasted time and money changing out a stock dropper post. Sounds like a win-win situation if you ask me. Our 10th and final prediction of 2025 is that riding bikes would still be fun. And I'm happy to report that we were undeniably correct here. We got to review dozens of rad new bikes, and I love the time I got to spend on every single one of them. I also got back into BMX, which has helped keep things fresh and exciting, and I even dabbled in aqua biking. Okay, no, I didn't do that, but hey, the people in that picture sure look to be having fun. So yeah, riding bikes is awesome, and it always will be. And if you agree, then you might as well just go ahead and hit that like button right now. Thanks for doing that, and until next time, remember that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.